Morning, everybody. How's everybody doing? All right, let's Steve, would you like to lead us in prayer? Let's bow.
Open your word and just pray to help us take it all in and apply these things to our lives. And look back about the history of mankind. We just pray it should be fair and as He presents it to us today. And we just thank you for this time. Please be with us certain need you. In Jesus' name we pray.
All right, so we're in chapter 13, 14, and 15 of Genesis today, and so we start out. Abram's coming back from Egypt, and put the map up there because as you read through it, I don't know if you can read it or not, but just to kind of, I know as I was reading through, you start thinking they're talking about locations and different things. About where they're at. So just kind of as reference as we read through it. Some of the stuff is going to be, in case you can't quite see that, it's going to be kind of right there to the right of, like where it says Israel. And then about a foot to the left of where it says Jordan, I guess, is kind of the area. So anyway, so would anybody like to read about the first 9 verses of chapter 13?
So Abram went up from Egypt to Negev, he and his wife and all that belonged to him, and Lot with him. Now Abram was very rich in livestock and silver and gold. He went on his journeys from the Negev as far as Bethel, to the place where his tent had been, beginning between Bethel and Ai, to the place of the altar which he had made there formerly. And there Abram called on the name of the Lord. Now Lot, who went with Abram, also had flocks and herds and tents. And the land could not sustain them while dwelling together, for their possessions were so great that they were not able to remain together. And there was strife between the herdsmen of Abram's livestock, and the herdsmen of Lot's livestock. Now the Canaanite and Perizzites were dwelling with them in the land. So Abram said to Lot, "Please let there be no strife between you and me, nor between my herdsmen and your herdsmen, for we are brothers. Is not the whole land before you? Please separate from me. If to the left, then I'll go to the right, or if to the right, then I'll go to the left." Lot lifted up his eyes and saw all the valley of the Jordan, that it was well watered everywhere. This was before the Lord destroyed Sodom and Gomorrah. Like the garden of the Lord, like the land of Egypt, as you go to Zoar. So Lot chose for himself all the valley of the Jordan, and Lot journeyed eastward. Thus they separated from each other. Abram settled in the land of Canaan, while Lot settled in the cities of the valley, and moved his tents as far as Sodom. Now the men of Sodom were wicked exceedingly, and sinners against the Lord.
And then the Lord said, verse 14, the Lord said to Abram, after Lot had parted from him, lift up your eyes from where you are and look north and south and east and west. All the land that you see I will give you and your offspring forever. I will take your offspring like the dust of the earth, so that if anyone could count the dust, then your offspring could be counted. Go walk through the length and breadth of the land, for I am giving it to you. So Abram moved his tents and went to live near the great trees of Mamre at Hebron, where he built an altar to the Lord. we see people start to quarrel. It kind of struck me because, land seems like that's always the biggest argument that gets a man in trouble often,
I mean, you see families break up when they can't decide what to do with land that they've inherited. You see countries go to war over land, and all these sorts of things. And one thing that stuck out is how Abram just says in the NIV, let's see, where was the word? So Abram said to Lot, let's not have any quarreling between you and me, because, or between your herdsmen and mine, for we are brothers, or relatives. Is it not the whole land before you? He says, let's just part company, And then what we see is, as you read down through there, Abram gives him the option. He doesn't say, hey, I'll go. He goes, you stay right here. You know what? Because there might be something better down the road. He said, you go where you want to go. Choose where you want to go. And that'll be adequate for what your needs. And so he lets him choose. And then he heads, which would be kind of, from where we talked about, it's kind of down from there, and down on kind of the southern end of the Dead Sea there, which is the medium blue dot in the line on the map there, to the area near Sodom and Gomorrah. So I thought that was interesting how he didn't fall into that trap of creating some kind of rift between him and his family or whatever. He just said, hey, there's no need to fight about this. We'll just go our separate ways so that we can find the best property for us, and so that we can raise our families and our herds and all these sorts of things. The trees of Mamre, just a side note, it might be something interesting just to kind of Google and look up and read a little bit about. There's still trees, or a tree that they kind of think is traditionally the tree in that area. I didn't get into it to see. Obviously, that's probably somewhat disputed. It may or may not be the real tree, but it's kind of interesting how there's still some trees in that region that people think might be connected to this story. Whether they are or not, I don't know. Just kind of an interesting side note. So moving on to chapter 14. So after Abram built an altar to the Lord there near the trees of Mamre, at this time, and this, I found this a bit hard to follow, but anyway, I'll read through it. At this time, Amraphel, king of Shinar, Arok, king of Elazar, Chedorlaomer, king of Elam, and Tidal, king of Goam, went to war against Beriah, king of Sodom, Bisha, king of Gomorrah, Sinab, king of Admah, Shemember, king of Zebulun, and the king of Bela, what is Zor. Got all that? I kind of broke it down in my mind. I kind of dropped their names and then just said the king of Shinar, the king of Elazar, the king of Elam, the king of Goam, and they went to war, those four people, against the king of Sodom, the king of Gomorrah, the king of Admah, and the king of Zeboim, and the king of Bela. So, if that helps you wrap your mind around it a little bit better. All these latter kings joined forces in the valley of Siddim, or the Salt Sea, I think there was another reference in another version, maybe. Another one says Valley of Siddim, says that's the Dead Sea Valley. Okay. For 12 years they had been subjected to Chedorlaomer, or the king of Elam, subject to the king of Elam, but in the 13th year they rebelled. In the 14th year, Chedorlaomer and the kings allied with him went out and defeated the they defeated some people. Anybody want to read that? In the 14th year, the king of Elam and the kings allied with him went out and defeated the Rephates in Ashtaroth, the Karnaim, the Zuzites in Ham, the Emites in Shavah, Kerathaim, and the Horites in the hill country of Seir, as far as El Paran, near the desert. Then they turned back and went to En Mishpat, that is Kadesh, and they conquered the whole territory of the Amalekites as well as the Amorites who were living in Hazazon Tamar. And after reading all that, I realized that about every sci-fi or adventure story or whatever that I've ever seen has basically made up names or used these names for different things. And it sounds like you're reading some kind of script from Star Trek or Lord of the Rings or something. Okay, so then the king of Sodom, the king of Gomorrah, the king of Admah, the king of Zeboim, and the king of Bela, that is Zor, marched out and drew up their battle lines in the valley of Siddim against Chedorlaomer, king of Elam, and the other three kings aforementioned in the beginning of the chapter. And so it was 4 against 5 kings. Kind of interesting. They tell you who it is, but yet they go ahead and say it's 4 against 5. So now the valley of Siddim was full of tar pits, and when the kings of Sodom and Gomorrah fled, some of the men fell into them, and the rest fled to the hills. The 4 kings seized all the goods of Sodom and Gomorrah and all their food. Then they went away. They also carried off Abram's nephew Lot and his possessions, since he was living in Sodom. Somebody want to read let's see, 13 through to 17. One who had escaped came and reported this to Abram, the Hebrew. Now Abram was living near the great tree of Mamre and the Amorite, a brother of Eshcol and Ur, all of whom were allied with Abram. When Abram heard that his relative had been taken captive, he called out 318 trained men whom in his household and went in pursuit as far as Dan. During the night, Abram divided his men to attack them, and he routed them, pursuing them as far as Habah, north of Damascus. He recovered all the goods and brought back his relative Lot and his possessions to gather with the women and the other people. After Abram returned from defeating Chedorlaomer and the kings allied with him, the kings of Sodom came out to meet him in the valley of Shavah, that is the king's valley. Then Melchizedek, king of Salem, brought out bread and wine. He was priest of God Most High, and he blessed Abram, saying, "Blessed be Abram by God Most High, creator of heaven and earth. And blessed be God Most High, who delivered your enemies into your hands. Then Abram gave him a tenth of everything. The king of Sodom said to Abram, give me the people and keep the goods for yourself. But Abram said to the king of Sodom, I have raised my hand to the Lord, God Most High, creator of heaven and earth, and have taken an oath that I will accept nothing belonging to you, not even a thread or the thong of a sandal, so that you will never be able to say, I made Abram rich. I will accept nothing but what my men have eaten, and the share that belongs to the men who went with me to Aner, Eshcol, and Mamre. Let them have their share. So I love how, they're like, and I guess, it would be a grateful gesture, right? But he knows these guys from Sodom that he doesn't want to have any part. He doesn't want anything that they own. Just give him, whatever is owed to him for the service rendered, the basic stuff, and to his men, because he doesn't want to be beholden to them at all. He doesn't want them to be able to say anything about, Abram took all our stuff, he's rich because of us, and it definitely, it shows his character, and then furthermore, don't mess with Abram's family, because I wonder if he would have done anything had Lot been spared in this particular case, and I'm kind of thinking he probably wouldn't have, but because Lot got taken up and got caught up in it. Sounds familiar from another story, doesn't it? Lot getting caught up in something that he shouldn't maybe be a part of. But so he goes up there and he takes care of business, and you kind of think, because they've defeated, these 4 armies have defeated 5 armies. It kind of sounds like that these are pretty good soldiers. That these are pretty good. These kings have some good tactics and stuff, and they've easily routed the 5 kings of Sodom and Gomorrah, and et cetera, et cetera. And but then Abram goes up there. We don't know how many men the other team had, but we see here he has 318 trained soldiers or trained men. And you see some of the tactics. He talks about dividing his men, so we can kind of get an idea of, he's looking at the situation, and he's coming up with a plan to take care of business and defeat these guys. So the questions in the lesson plan, describe Abram's physical prosperity from chapter 13. Yep.
Very blessed.
Why was it necessary that Abram and Lot separate? Yep, so they could find the resources they need and not get in a fight about it. Did Abram or did Lot take first pick of the lands? Which lands did Lot take? Which lands did Abram take? So, yep. Describe the men of Sodom. Bad guys. Legendary bad guys. Why did Abraham take, kind of switches from Abram to Abraham in the questions. Why did Abraham take the men of his household to war? I think basically to save Lot, and maybe that's kind of an opinion, but it seems like that's pretty much it. Who was Melchizedek? Yep, yep. Apparently he was, he was a believer in God, but he wasn't, I don't think he wasn't Hebrew, but he was priest of God Most High. What percentage of all possessions did Abram give Melchizedek? That's 14. 18 and 20. I don't know if my version has an actual percentage. Okay. Yep. Oh, okay. Yeah, it's at the end of verse 20. Abram gave him a tenth of everything. Yep. In your notes. I don't know. In pirate lingo, booty's like the haul, the take. So, without looking it up, I'm going to go with that, I guess. So, yeah. I'm trying to see if I got a footnote in this. Yeah, that's interesting. What version do you have, or what Bible do you have? NIV. What year was that? What year is your Bible from? Not that it matters. I'm just curious. Pirate version from the 1790s. Okay. Yeah. I've got the 1984 version, which I think a lot of people, probably my age, that's probably the Bible they got. But I was listening to podcasts for Duck Dynasty crowd, and the one son that's on that podcast his Bible's well used, and he's got it on there, and he's like, in my 1984 NIV, as he's like trying to hold the pages in it, and I'm like, okay, yeah, that's the version I have, but he's about my age, so. Yes or no, did Abram take goods for pay for saving the king of Sodom from his enemies? Why? So I think we covered that. So chapter 15. Somebody want to read? Let's see, there's 21. Somebody want to read about 10 verses of chapter 15? Chaldeans. So now we see, we're starting to really get into the meat of the Bible story, right? I mean, this is where things start to, everything starts to get laid out here. You think about, what Father Abraham, had many sons and all that, the song we sing and all that kind of thing, where you really start to get, not that things weren't in motion, but this is kind of, seems like that starting point. And as I was reading this, I was reminded where he said, look at the stars, and that'll be, look up at the heavens and count the stars, if indeed you can count them. Then he said to him, so shall your offspring be. I remember, and I find it a little bit ironic, Carl Sagan used to say, I think it was Carl Sagan, he would say something at the beginning of his show, billions and billions of stars. And now we see on Earth, there's billions and billions of people. There's not really necessarily a number, just billions and billions, right? Kind of funny that an atheist like Carl Sagan he was kind of repeating exactly what the Bible said in a roundabout way, the truth of it. And, but also I guess I kind of asked myself a question, does God specifically mean, blood relatives? Or is he kind of meaning, those that will ultimately follow him, because of Abraham? I don't know. I'm just kind of asking the question. Anybody got any thoughts on that? Yes, maybe. No? Anyway. Probably a little of both, but certainly we tie ourselves to Abraham as we look at the lineage of things, even though we're not necessarily directly related to him, but we are in faith. So then we go down here and we have kind of a grotesque scene of cutting animals in halves. I kind of wondered, did that mean like in half this way or in half this way? Does it say anywhere? Does anybody know if it says if it? Certainly one would be easier than the other to accomplish, but yeah, yep. But he didn't do the birds. I don't know. Do we know why he didn't do the birds? He didn't cut them in half? I guess it doesn't matter. Maybe it's just because they were little. That's kind of what I thought. Maybe they were just too small for that. All right. So as the sun was setting, Abram fell into a deep sleep, and a thick, dreadful darkness came over him. Then the Lord said to him, know for certain that your descendants will be strangers in a country not their own, and they will be enslaved and mistreated 400 years. But I will punish the nation they serve as slaves, and afterward they will come out with great possessions. You, however, will go to your fathers in peace and be buried at a good old age. In the 4th generation, your descendants will come back here, for the sin of the Amorites has not yet reached its full measure. When the sun had set and darkness had fallen, a smoke fire pot with a blazing torch appeared and passed between the pieces. On that day, the Lord made a covenant with Abram and said, to your descendants I give this land from the river of Egypt to the great river Euphrates, the land of the Kenites, Kenizzites, Kadmonites, Hittites, Perizzites, those folks, Amorites, Canaanites, Girgashites, and Jebusites. So, what's that? Euphrates. That sounds good. I like that. So, so we see God saying, making that, he's telling him that, they're going to end up, enslaved, and they're going to have to deal with that, but they will come back, and basically saying, hey, there's things coming, but I am still with you. You are still going to get what is promised in spite of many generations of hardships and dark times. Question, since Abram had no children, whom did he say would inherit his household at his death? One of his servants? What's that? Abram. Yeah. God said the descendants of Abram would be as numerous as blank and blank. There you go. While Abram was asleep, what did he see passing between the pieces of animals? Was it a torch or what do they call it? Yep. How did God show Abram that the land would be his possession? Yeah. I know that I will gain. But Abram said, O sovereign, verse 8, sovereign Lord, how can I know that I will gain possession of it? So the Lord said to him, bring me a heifer, a goat, and a ram, each 3 years old, along with a dove and a young pigeon. So basically the whole thing with the animals and that was how he proved to him. What did Abram do when the birds of prey tried to eat the dead animals he had arranged on the ground? He simply chased them away. Did God tell Abram that his descendants would be slaves? Yes. Where? And how long? 400 years. In the blank generation, God promised Abram that his descendants would come back to this land. The land which God gave Abram reached from where to where? Yep, so the whole, see Egypt over there, and then clear over Euphrates River over there by where it says Mesopotamia. So quite a large space, especially when you consider, that modern Israel is just that little strip on the left there by the Mediterranean. And so yeah. Questions, comments? And that, and we see that a lot, we see his faith, and his actions in these chapters, and his wisdom, really, not taking things from Sodom, not letting something easily solved come between him and his family, saving his family when need be. These are all great traits. He seems, he's making great choices. He's clearly a man of God. And then even Melchizedek, blessed be Abram by God Most High. So after he comes back and he's recognizing his, actions and choices as well, so yeah. So fun stuff, fun stories. Steve? Yeah, seems like that's sticking in, that is in my mind there somewhere, yeah. They must have had sharp rocks or whatever I guess they had some primitive metal tools.